Good morning. Welcome to Integrated Wellbeing Institute's podcast and YouTube channel, the place for grieving people and the professionals who serve them to come for education, inspiration, and guidance through the wisdom of the body and the professionals that come here. Today, I'm very happy to introduce to you Caro Brookings. Hello, Caro.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. Caro and I met when she reached out to me to invite me to be on her summit a couple of years ago, maybe even 3. Hasn't it been that long?
Yeah, coming up for it. It's been a while.
And we followed each other ever since. And I invited her here today because she is one of those people bereaved by suicide. Her mom took her life in November of 2013. And as many of you in our audience know, that puts us into a shattered state. And Caro, like many of us, flailed around in guilt for many years. And then she found what worked for her and is now a neuro coach. So what is a certified neuro coach, Caro? Can you tell our audience about that, please?
Yeah, of course. Great question. So basically, as a certified neuro coach, everything I do is brain-based and science-backed. So I've learned all about how the brain works, how our thoughts are created, and how we can rewire the brain. So I work with my clients who are all suicide loss survivors and who struggle with their guilt and all the complex grief to really look at the thoughts, take a deep dive, see, okay, are they actually true? Are they actually helpful? Because usually they're not. And then the great thing is we can take those thoughts and refute them. And with these refutes, rewire the brain. And the reason I love it so much, because I had been looking at so many strategies, nothing resonated with me. But I love this one because it is brain-based and science-backed. It works for everyone every time, as long as they know the right steps to take. So I know sometimes people say, oh, it'll work for everyone else but me. But it's just not true. There is this thing that works for everyone.
Okay, so what I'm aware of is I'm aware that you had a journey until you found this strategy. So will you tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. So like you said, I lost my mom to suicide in November of 2013, and it was a big shock for us. And like I said, all the complex grief, especially the guilt. Some of the things I struggled with was wanting to go to sleep because I wanted to dream of my mom. So every night when I went to sleep, I thought, okay, please let me dream of my mom, because I figured it was the only way that I could be with her now. Another thing I did, I used to play what I call this game in my head, where I thought, okay, if I can go back in time only once, what can I do? How can I save her? And I played through all of the different scenarios. And even though I call it a game, to me, it was really serious. Like I was convinced, okay, if someone suddenly comes to me and says, Caro, here's your chance, I wanted to be prepared. But I was never able to come up with a perfect solution. And now looking back, it tells me 2 things. Firstly, that was my way of processing my mom's suicide. And secondly, there is no perfect solution, which takes me to the should-haves and could-haves, right? People say, I should have done this, I could have done that. But when you really look at it critically, you can't guarantee that your loved one wouldn't have taken their life. So I struggled with all of that. It took up a lot of my energy. I tried all the different things. I was in my last year of uni, so I went to see my uni counselor. I spoke to a psychiatrist. I went to my family physician, local support groups. I thought I was doing everything, right? Ticking all the boxes. Okay, try this, try that. But I still felt really guilty. I still felt angry with my mom for leaving us. all of that complex grief was still within me, and I wasn't able to process it or let any of that go. Another thing which made it even more complex for me was that even though, as far as we're aware, my mom wasn't ever diagnosed with any mental health issues, her mom suffered from depression and was treated in and out of hospital for a long, long time. So I sort of thought, okay, what does that mean for me? It's my mom's mom, it's my mom, and now me as a female in the family. So I was worried about that, but I was just, going along, trying to live my life. I graduated from uni, went on to do my graduate job, not really trying to think about it too much, until the day that our first daughter was born. And that's really where everything changed. My whole mindset changed around that, because I was holding this precious baby girl in my hands, and I thought, okay, obviously she's another, female in the family. So it was really important for me to break that generational curse. And that's when I got serious. And, when you sit there on the sofa and you feed them all day long because they're always hungry, I thought, okay, I'm going to use this time to start doing some research. Now, like I said before, there were so many things that didn't resonate with me, because it felt like it's something that someone just made up, or something that worked for them but didn't work for me, until I found out how to rewire the brain, how to challenge my thoughts. So I went through that whole process myself for my own healing, and it had such a profound impact on my life. And we know there's not enough support out there for suicide loss survivors. So I thought, okay, I want to help others. And that's when I went on to do my neuro coaching certification.
Ah, congratulations. So what I'm doing is the math here in the background, and it feels to me like it was probably 4 grueling years, maybe even 5 grueling years after your mother passed, before your daughter was born. Did I get the math right?
Yeah, I was 4 and a bit years. Yeah.
And so here you were. I love your strategy of, if I had a chance to go back, I want to do something perfectly, and I want to be ready when I get that chance. That's amazing. I've never met anyone that has framed it that way. So thank you for sharing that with our audience. The other thing that you said that I'm very curious about is, did your mother come to you in sleep?
She did occasionally, never as much as I wanted to. And she usually, there are different types of dreams, but sometimes she would stay in the background. She wouldn't ever really talk. And in other dreams, I would be aware that she was really dead. And then there were dreams where the dream itself was about something really not important, but she was there. And when I woke up, I thought, oh gosh, I was worrying about this very not important thing, and there was my mom part of the situation. But of course, there's, you can have lucid dreams, and I've read about what you can do about that. But yeah.
We had Dr. Stanley Krippner on in March, and he talked about lucid dreaming. Okay. So that was wonderful for our audience to hear. So, like so many people, you really struggled. You wanted to make meaning of your mother's passing. You looked at what was happening in your generations, and you wanted to heal those. And it was the birth of that precious daughter of yours that really awakened your awareness to, here I am right now. What can I do? So as you were doing the research, how long did it take you to discover the neuro program that you became certified in?
It took me the best part of a year to discover it, because it's a funny story of how I discovered it, because we always think, we think, then that's part of the brain, right? We think we make all of these conscious decisions and look here and look there, and that's what I did, and I didn't find anything. And then I had downloaded this app onto my phone, which is like an exercise app, so it tells you different exercises you can do. And because it was free, it had adverts on there. And one of the ads was about, challenging the thoughts, rewiring the brain. So I was like, oh, that looks interesting, I'm going to look into it. And that was the program I actually found, which really resonated with me because it's all about the brain and science. So I knew it was worth its while because it wasn't just something, out of the blue. So that's how I find it. And then like I said, I went through that program myself, and then I went on to do the certification.
So you went through the program and then circled back to do the certification.
Yeah, so I went through the program. I used all of the techniques on myself, but there's a difference between doing something on yourself and learning all the stuff like in the background and how it all fits together. So that's why it was important to me. I thought, okay, I've used the strategies on myself. I know they work. I can see how it all fits together, but I want to have something to back up my experience. I want to have something to back up my knowledge through the certification.
Thank you. And I'm really pleased that the aspect that has been coming up so recently in all your emails to me has been guilt. Will you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So guilt is a really big one. So that's what I focus on. Most suicide loss survivors struggle with guilt. And I always say, if you don't, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But unfortunately, most of us do. But it goes back to, those untrue and unhelpful thoughts. So when people feel guilty, they think about the shouldas and couldas. Well, like I said, you can make a list and you can think of really critically, okay, if I had done this exactly, maybe you could have saved your loved one at that moment in time, maybe not, but we never know if they might have not taken their life another time. And the other thing that the brain does as well, because the brain's number one job is to protect us and to ensure our survival, it always looks out for the dangers, it always looks out for the negatives. So what the brain does is it looks at all of the things that we feel like we didn't do, whereas there's all the stuff over here that we did do for them, but our brain just doesn't focus on it. So that's another great exercise to do, is actually sitting down and thinking about it and writing down, always with pen and paper, because it activates different areas of the brain. Writing down all the things that you did do for your loved one. And once you start, you'll be surprised how much stuff comes up. So this is really to just put the brain in saying, okay, there's all of this stuff over here as well. And the last thing is to really focus on the present. So focusing on where we're at right now, because we can't, as much as we want, we can't change the past, but we can be present and we can be here for our loved ones, so we can still change the future. And the thing is, guilt takes up so much mind space, so much energy. So imagine if we could release the energy around the guilt and not have to deal with that anymore, and use the energy to actually honor our loved one and remember them. So there's a few things that come together there. And the other thing, again, just explaining around the brain, is the brain always wants to be in control, but control is really only an illusion. We don't have control about anything outside of ourselves. We just have control to a certain extent over how we react and what we do. But what the brain would rather do is cling onto that illusion of control by believing, okay, you could have done this or you should have done that, because that means that you had the control to be able to change it, but you didn't, right? But it would rather do that, even though it's incredibly painful place to be, rather than saying, okay, I was actually helpless in changing the situation. There's nothing that I could have done to change this, because to the brain, helplessness like that is really scary. So the brain has a very different agenda to ourselves, to our higher self. The brain just wants us to stay stuck, familiar, ensure our survival. It doesn't care about anything else. Whereas we most of us don't want to sit in that guilt and in that really painful grief forevermore. So it's an important thing to be aware of.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, because as a speech pathologist, I worked for years with rewiring the brain with my stroke patients, and told them we're creating new detours. So I've read that we will be growing new brain cells until the day we leave the planet. And I have a great deal of faith in our brains and their capacity. So I'm curious about one of the things you said is when we take the energy of guilt and focus it on remembering our beloved, then that frees us up. We did many things to honor our son, Reed. What did you do to honor your mother? Where did that, when that guilt energy could be released, where did you focus it then?
Yeah, there's a few things. Well, the first thing, the most obvious thing, is the work that I do now supporting other suicide loss survivors in a number of ways, because I don't sit there and just focus on the guilt and the grief anymore. So I've got my head free to support others. I also, for those on YouTube, you'll be able to see I've got a memorial tattoo sleeve of
wow.
all of the things that remind me of my mom, which is nice because I can just look at it and, you know, have that reminder. And another example is my mom always used to bake Christmas cookies with me every Christmas time, and we listened to certain German Christmas songs. And I find the songs, even though they're many years old now, but yes, I do the same now with my kids. We bake Christmas cookies and we listen to the same songs that I used to listen to with my mom. So that sort of brings us all closer together, because they never got to meet her, but I want them to know the kind person that she was.
Oh, how beautiful is that? And I am imagining that the smells and the sounds and the laughter that happens with your children will make wonderful memories for them for years to come.
Yeah.
So that's beautiful. What kind of German Christmas cookies do you make?
So I'm not sure if they exist over here, but they're similar to sort of the shortbread cookies.
Yes.
Very similar. And then we put either different colored icing on there or melted chocolate, depending on the mood. So yeah,
that's exciting. Good. Well, getting back now from all that sensory picture that you painted for us, how long does the program take for people to rewire their brain and have a new way of being?
Yeah, it's a good question. So in the labs, when they did the brain scans and they looked into that, basically what our viewers and listeners need to know as well, that rewiring the brain, like you mentioned, means that we break down our old neural pathways and build new neural pathways. So that's what we mean by that. And brain scans have shown us it takes around 67 days to do that. Now, it also takes consistency. So we rewire the brain by listening to certain statements that we create, which are refuting those untrue and unhelpful thoughts. So consistency is really important. And it also depends how deep-seated was that old belief. How much are we open to change? How much are we trusting the process? So there's a lot of things that go into that. And some people might say, oh, 67 days, that's over 2 months. And, oh, you know, is it worth it? But really, when we think about it, those beliefs we may have been holding on to for decades, because our stuff doesn't just happen and come up when we lose our loved one to suicide. There's all of the baggage really that we bring onto that journey, and it just gets magnified. And then we're like, okay, you know, I really want to do something about that. So to me, that isn't really that long. And listening to statements, it's not once you've created them, the listening part is not a lot of effort. So I say to people, it's around 67 days, but check in with yourself, because once the brain is rewired, you can really tell. And I've had I've noticed it myself, and I've had other people, my clients, tell me that, is that once the brain is rewired, your old or your still current belief, you don't even recognize that as your own thought or belief anymore. It feels like it's someone else's, and it's because we've broken down that old neural pathway and we've replaced it with the new one. So you then fully believe that new thought or belief because the new neural pathway was built.
Yes, and I imagine people really feel that in their body. When they're saying something that's absolutely true, they feel that. Here at the Institute, we always say grief brings up the deepest, darkest parts of ourselves, longing to be heard and healed. And that's what I heard you say. What's under the iceberg, is what you're helping people recognize and then shift, release and shift. So that's really amazing. And I'm curious, what are the ages of the people that find you, Caro?
Oh, I've had people as young as in their early 20s to as mature as in the mid-late 70s. So I've have all age ranges. And I always say, it's never too late, you're never too old. It works. You just need to start the process. But I've been working with a lady in her early 70s, and she's seeing great results. And I've been working with someone who was bereaved 11 years ago, and she's seeing great results. So I hope that gives people some hope and encouragement.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is that we never know at what point the workable thing is going to come along for us. And so it's so wonderful for our audience to hear that it's never too late. We're to live even more fully into this life that we are here to live. And that's so exciting. Yes, it really, really is. So, and the reason I asked the question about age is because so many people who are younger are science-based, aware of different aspects than people in my generation are. I have an interest in the brain because of my former career, and an interest in the body now as a somatic grief practitioner. And so it's very, very interesting for me to hear, like this work, it's a wide range of people. And 67 days, can it go longer than that? Can it go 90 days or 6 months or anything like that?
Yeah, so that's why I always say to people, keep checking in with yourselves, because especially if you're doing it on your own, if you're not doing it with support, because there's lots of nuances to the statements that you listen to. Like I said, consistency is really important, listening to it, every morning and every night. So there's lots of factors that go into it. So we say it's around 67 days, and brain scans have shown us that, because we can see the neural pathways breaking down and new ones forming. But when we live in the real world and we have other things on our plate, things come up. So I wouldn't get too fixated on the 67 days, use it as a guide, but the important thing is checking in with yourself. How do I feel about these beliefs?
Well, and what's exciting to me is that what you've done is you've basically said, in less than 90 days, in less than 3 months, your life can be different. You can feel different. Your body's going to feel different. Your heart is going to be more open, and your brain is going to be quiet and calm. And there's going to be that well-being within that's always there that can now shine through.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It was really interesting. In one of my readings this morning, it said, let the sunshine of love and confidence shine through. So for you, it's let that love, let that sunshine of peace and new beginnings shine through.
Yeah.
for your people. Yes, yes. That's so exciting. And I'm so impressed with how often you show up for people on Facebook. Tell us about the platforms you're on, please, and what you've experienced by being on those different platforms.
Yeah, sure. So I've got my Instagram page, I've got my Facebook page, but really where I'm hang out the most is my free private Facebook group called Healing After Suicide Loss. And we've got around 850 members in there now. And to me, it was really important to create something different. So the same as my approach to help people is different to, you know, the counseling and the peer support groups and all of that. I wanted to make my Facebook group different. And I know different people resonate with different things, but I just felt that those groups where people just share their pain and that's all they do and nothing else, I don't find it very fruitful. And I've heard from a lot of people they had to leave those groups in the end because it was just dragging them down. So my group is different because every day we post something either inspirational, maybe a quote, maybe a journaling prompt, something to think about, some new bits of information. And we have a really lovely supportive community in there. And then I also show up live every Saturday where I talk about a topic that's of interest, whether that's, you know, talking about guilt, maybe how to go through your loved one's belongings, maybe, you know, feelings of anger, maybe family relationships. There's lots of different things that we talk about in there. And as you mentioned, I do my regular interview series. I do support series, which we're actually doing this week, master classes. And then, like I said, I work with my private one-on-one clients. I started a group coaching back in June. And I've also literally just released a self-study course for people who want to try it on their own, but with some guidance in terms of worksheets and audio. So there's really something there for everyone, no matter how they best work and where they're at on their journey.
That's wonderful, because this is such a complicated grief. And for people then to be able to come together with the intention of rewiring their brain and basically setting themselves free is such a service that you're providing. It's absolutely wonderful. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience? Other things? You said, I'm well prepared, Georgena. We can go as long as we want. What else was it you wanted to share with our audience today,
Yeah.
Caro?
So I just, you know, if it's the first time that people have heard about rewiring the brain and they might find it a bit daunting, really they can take the first step. Anyone can do that. Just starting to be aware of your thoughts and really be aware of what you're thinking, because 90% of what we think and do is actually driven by our subconscious, which means that only 10% of the time we make conscious decisions, which, you know, again, it's mind-blowing when you think about it. That's why, like you said, with the iceberg, going deeper beneath the surface is so important. But if people can just start being aware of their thoughts and know that not all of their thoughts are true, not all of their thoughts are helpful, that can be a great start, starting to challenge thoughts that are having. For example, you know, if you think, oh, my loved one's suicide is all my fault, that could be an untrue thought, an unhelpful thought. And you can, instead of just believing everything that you're thinking, you can challenge that and think, okay, what is an outside influence, something that shaped my loved one's life that I had no control over? So then you've already debusted that myth that it's all your fault, right? And you can do that with everything, really. And then I would encourage people to start writing down those thoughts and their lies, really, right? Because they're just not true. We call them lies. To write them down, carry pen and paper around with you, especially at the beginning, so you can write it down word for word and you don't forget later, oh, what was that thoughts, and you can also keep a tally so you can see which come up the most. So even, you know, if that's the only thing they take away from this conversation, is they can make a start wherever they are on their journey just by doing this, which anyone can do.
Oh, that's wonderful. One of the things we teach at the Institute, or not teach, we just share the research, that 85% of our thoughts are negative, and 95% of those are repetitive.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the case. And one of the things we suggest in our suicide bereavement support groups is that people take the first 5 or 10 minutes of every hour to simply write down what it is they're thinking, occupying their thoughts about the death, the if, woulda, coulda, shouldas, if onlys, I feel so guilty. And then just say, okay, you've got to stay here in the parking lot until I return at the top of the hour. And then you can have another 5 minutes of my time, or you can have another 10 minutes of my time, because we can focus our time. We can focus our thoughts when we're aware that we have that power to do that.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that we share in our group work. Mm-hmm. With suicide bereavement support is something that in Oregon, we have several groups that are online or in person. It's really nice for people to know, hey, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one struggling with this thought and with this feeling.
Yeah. Amazing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, it really is.
Yeah.
So thank you very, very much for being here today. Is the summit going to happen again?
Yeah, so we've actually got one coming up. I'm in the very early stages of it right now, but the next summit or interview series will run between November 6th and November 10th. And this one will be centered all around navigating conversations after suicide loss. So to shatter that stigma, to break the silence, so we can show up confidently, talk about our journey, talk about our loved one, and keep the memory alive. And I'm hoping that you'll join us again.
Yes, I already have like 5 things to share.
Perfect.
It was interesting. One of the things that I have always said when people ask, are you a mother? Do you have children? And I always say, yes, I'm the mother of 2 sons. Mm-hmm. And then when they ask about my sons, I always begin with Vincent, who is living here in the same city as I. And many times then they forget to ask about Reed. But if they do, then I share what I feel is appropriate for them to know. Yeah. You know? So it's and just having that language, those things to say allows, like you said, the bereaved to show up confident. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's so very, very, very important. And tell us once again, please, the name of your private Facebook group, Caro.
Yeah, it's called Healing After Suicide Loss.
Excellent. It's just says what it is. Yeah. And that's marvelous. And the fact that you have 800 people, and what I heard is every day there's something inspirational for them. Yeah. And every Saturday you show up. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing.
I love having that connection and those conversations, because I don't just want it to be, you know, throwing things at people. I want to sure it sinks in, answer questions. It's very interactive. I love my community.
That's wonderful. That's good. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share with us today before our time comes to a close?
The only other thing that came to mind when we talked a lot about thoughts and our brain focusing on the negative, and we say, okay, think about the things that you did do for your loved one. There's this great analogy, because sometimes people say, well, but isn't it like discounting all of the bad stuff and just the positive thinking part of it? But what we're really doing is we're focusing. You can only focus on one thing at a time. And when people say, oh, I'm multitasking, well, you're not, because you just keep switching your focus. Yes. So there's this great analogy of the miners when they go down the mine and they've got their light on their head and they turn it on and they can only see where they turn their head. Everything else is dark. Now, as they go down the mine, they might have all the dirt on one side and all the gold on the other side. Now, both are still always there, but it depends. Do they look in one direction and see the dirt? The gold is still there, but they're just able to deal with the dirt. But they can also look in the other direction and focus on the gold. Doesn't mean that the dirt is gone. We're not saying, oh, this never happened, but it's just what we choose to focus on. So we say everything is still there, but you can choose what you focus on and what is helpful for you to focus on.
Yes. And so as people are leaving today, I invite you to begin to do what Caro has suggested. When you have a thought, notice the thought, write the thought down, and then with a sense of curiosity, notice how often that thought is repeated. Maybe in that 5 or 10 minute parking area that I shared, or throughout the day as Caro shared, and just begin to notice, because as we've said over and over, awareness is the first key to change. And so when we have that self-awareness, it's like, oh, there my mind goes again. Well, it's just in the, I-5 corridor. There it is. There's nothing wrong. That's where it's focused. We've got to get it over here in a different corridor to think.
Yeah. And I love how you said come at it from a place of curiosity, because often people come from a place of judgment, and that's not helpful. It makes things even worse. People say, oh, goodness me, there I go again with my negative thoughts, or I should have done this, could have done that. But really it's like, oh, okay, I noticed there's this thought, I noticed that I've had this before, I wonder why that is, I wonder what I can do about it, because it's just so much more helpful and also self-compassionate to come from a place of curiosity.
It really is. Because curiosity and judgment live in different parts of the brain. And that's what's so important for us to realize. We've got this amazing brain, and at times it can take us down into that spiral of gloom and doom, because this has been a horrific event that has happened in our lives. It's the dirt and it's the darkness, and there's much gold as we can then focus on them. So this year, when I bake Christmas cookies, which I do every year, I will be thinking of you and your 3 children and your mom. What's her name?
Karin.
Say it again.
Karin.
Kathy? Okay. Oh, that's great, because they're never gone when we say their names.
Yeah, that is true.
That's true. Thank you so much, Caro, for your time, your energy, and your dedication to making a difference for all of those people that are bereaved by the loss of someone who's died of suicide. I really, really appreciate your work, and best wishes for you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you again for having me.